Hi folks, Canadian Prepper here. All right guys, we got to talk about what has transpired in the last 48 hours. I've actually been out on the lake because I've been trying to enjoy what I can while the getting is good. If that's even remotely possible, because it cost me an arm and a leg to drive out to the lake. But we rented a pontoon boat, which also cost me an arm and a leg. And the gas to put in the pontoon boat also cost me whatever other limbs I had left. And it was fun until my dogs decided to succumb to motion sickness. And from that point forward, it was a rather shitty experience for all 185 pounds combined weight of my two German Shepherds. So use your imagination. It was fun, but it wasn't so fun. But it's probably an experience we're never going to forget, the kids included. Perhaps somewhat traumatized, but I think they found it quite funny, actually, to be honest, because they didn't have to clean it up. Anyways, guys, enjoy it while it lasts, because the shizzy is definitely hitting the fizzy. We're broadcasting. I say that. I'm not big enough to say I'm a broadcaster, but we are broadcasting from the part of our warehouse that holds the fur and the winter gear, because we're stockpiling winter stuff because the price of energy is going to be through the roof this week. And they're already saying in many countries that you should prepare to have your thermostat down a couple degrees this winter in order to save big on your energy bills. That means that you're going to have to bundle up while you're in your home. Okay, climate control may well be a thing of the past. Now look, in the last 48 hours, we had some pretty scary inflation numbers come out. The markets, of course, took a crap, just like my dogs. And it's not looking good, looking very scary. Now, a lot of people are comparing this to the 1970s. I get comments like this all the time. Well, it wasn't as bad, as now as it was in the 1970s. But there's things you need to put in perspective. For starters, in the 1970s, we weren't a bunch of whiny little bitches that were put out by the slightest perturbation in our Wi-Fi signal. Okay, we didn't go homicidal just because, we didn't get our food on time. That's the current world that we're living in now. What's more, and more importantly, is that the population of the planet has doubled since the 1970s. Since I was born in the 80s, but in the 1970s, the population was exactly half of what it is today. So are there twice as many people consuming a lot more stuff? In addition to that, we are now far more globalized than we were in the 1970s. Domestic production, manufacturing, and domestic self-reliance was a thing back in the day. But nowadays, one slight disturbance in one country or the other in production of various resources, extraction of resources, the delivery of those raw materials to places where they can be manufactured into goods and services and consumed on the other side of the world. Of course, this creates a lot of potential for problems. So this is why the crisis is potentially far worse than it was in the 70s. And of course, the way that we're measuring inflation in the first place is largely suspect. Now, apparently, inflationary grocery prices are only one factor here. We also have to factor in shrinkflation. I made a video probably around a year ago now, that showed you guys some Mountain House packaging from the year prior, and I think it was 2021 when we did that video. And basically, a lot of companies are reducing the amount of contents within their packages by around 10%. You factor on top of that the fact that they're charging a lot more for that. So the real inflationary numbers for a lot of packaged items, not things that are straight off the farm, are going to be a lot more than what the CPI numbers are showing. So they're saying that the cost of groceries have jumped on average 12% in the last year. This is from Market Watch, which is, as reputable as it's going to get for economic stuff. Chicken has risen by 17.4%, so they say. And of course, this is going to vary from place to place. I mean, if you live in a place where the chicken manufacturing capital of the United States, then chicken may be a little bit cheaper. But in today's globalized world, also, it doesn't really work that way either. As we all know, you can be right next, like we can have one of the biggest oil fields in Alberta and the price of gas can still be sky high, or we can be one of the biggest wheat exporters and the price would still be sky high, just the way it goes, throughout the global supply chain. And then of course there's the packaging, which has went sky high as a result of a lot of that stuff coming from Asia and the dyes and all the rest. But the price of milk, 16%, butter, 16%, coffee, 15.3%, fresh fish and shellfish, 13.1%, baby food, 13%. Urban Prepper posted a picture on his Instagram, shout out to him, of baby formula behind lock and key at the stores. That's how serious the problem has become. Now, as I've always said, the benefit of what's going on right now is that this is going to force our whiny little bitch asses to get out there, put our hands in the dirt, grow our own stuff, maybe force mothers or expectant mothers to try to find the means within them that we've used for thousands, if not millions of years to survive. You know, find using breastfeeding, whatever the case might be. I understand not everybody can do that, but I mean, we're gonna have to get real about our situation. They're even talking now about, in our locale, raising the price of, now they're gonna actually charge parents an additional fee to have class or the lunchroom monitored. Anyways, what I'm trying to say is that they're bringing in all these, you know, strange hidden taxes, if you will. Of course, a lot of this inflation that we're seeing right now is just a tax as a result of the unfettered modern monetary theory and the money printing that they did throughout 2020. It's all coming back, and we're paying it back with excessive amounts of interest, okay? There's an article here from Zero Hedge. It talks about the average for a Manhattan apartment is now at a record high of $4,000. There's a video of somebody showing off a bachelor suite, which is $8,000 a month, US dollars, just to rent, okay, getting no equity. I mean, what is going on? Like, how are people not, you know, revolting in the streets yet? I don't get it. I mean, we're really a stone's throw away from the radicalization of the left into we are the 99% thing. I think the only thing holding the floodgates at bay is Biden's appearances on Jimmy Kimmel. Those are pretty hilarious unto themselves, but you know, I just don't understand how people are not in the streets and up in arms yet. I think that's coming. I think that train ain't going to be too late. Now, we seeing in Texas right now, they're using record amounts of energy due to heat and due to increased population. So their power grid is going to be incredibly strained. So expect brownouts, blackouts possibly. And this is why they're encouraging people to, you know, not use as much air conditioning. And in the wintertime this year, especially in Europe, they're going to be encouraging people to use less natural gas, because the price of it is just going to be too high. Now, on the topic of natural gas, Freeport LNG explosion raises risk of European winter energy crisis. This is from CNN Business. A fire at one of the world's biggest suppliers of liquefied natural gas has thrown Europe's fragile energy security into doubt and spooked global gas markets. So Europe, as you may know, as a result of the war, is now going to be dependent on liquid natural gas. This is just one more of those things that wasn't a factor in the 1970s, at least not so much as it was today. One little kink in the supply chain, one little fuse that gets blown can cause billions of dollars of trade to be brought to a standstill. Now, this shutdown will cut the plant's output by 8% this month and the next, of course. This is added on to all the other stuff which is going on, you know, all the other embargoes that are being placed on Russian gas companies. And it's only going to make it worse, which is why, you know, Britain's food supply, they're saying it's going to be at risk. And of course, 6 million Britons could potentially struggle to pay their energy bills this winter, but I'm guessing it's going to be a lot more than that. This is from The Telegraph. They're saying that soaring energy bills have prompted the permanent closure of one of the largest fertilizer plants in the UK, raising concerns over the food supply in the country. The Telegraph reported on Thursday the Ince plant near Chester was used to produce supplies for nitrogen fertilizer and carbon monoxide. This is required to stun animals for slaughter and to package meat, among other things. So in addition to the energy crisis, we're also seeing a fertilizer crisis. All the inputs into the agricultural system, whether they're glufosinate, glyphosate, fertilizer, water scarcity is a big one right now. It's all getting more and more expensive, which is raising the cost of food. So yes, we have the technology, we have the know-how to grow a lot more food. The problem is we've created major ecological imbalances in the world. You know, I was talking with Gardening in Canada the other day, and we were talking about how, you know, in forestry, or if you look at the forest doesn't need fertilizer inputs because all the biomass falls back to the ground, you know, whether it's a forest fire or whatever the case. It all goes back to the ground. So the forest is constantly feeding off of itself. You don't need any other inputs into the system. It's self-sustaining. But when you start pulling things out of the system, you create these ecological imbalances in different places. Now, I've been speculating for a long time, and I haven't seen a documentary made about this yet, but when you look at the amount of produce which is shipped out of California every year, like millions of tons of produce every year, what are you shipping out? Well, you're actually shipping out water every year, in addition to the water that people are consuming, because there's, you know, one of the largest populations concentrated there. You're also shipping out all of that water in the form of produce, fruits, vegetables. So eventually it's going to create this ecological unbalance, which, if not properly mitigated and regulated and moderated, it's going to create some sort of ecological collapse. And if you don't think that we can't cause a ecological collapse on a small or medium scale or even a large scale, well, ask the cod fishery guys out in Newfoundland. I think, when was the cod collapse? I think that was in the 90s, wasn't it? Where we basically just, you know, fished the oceans clean. So that's another thing that's happening. Apparently Russia and Japan had this pact. I know I'm jumping around a lot here, but they had this fishing pact where Russia would allow Japan to fish their waters, and that's now been nixed as a result of dwindling diplomatic relations between the two countries. There's concern about desalination. So a lot of people are talking about, hey, we can just desalinate the water. And I think I've talked about this before, but in Senegal, I watched a little expose on Senegal, and apparently they're talking about desalination there, but they know that one of the consequences is going to be the increased salinity of the water around the plant, and of course in their whole coast, basically, and which is going to drastically reduce the fish population, and of course a big part of their market is their fisheries. So there's always, you know, a drawback to everything. Yes, we can, you know, convert the ocean into usable water, drinkable water that we can grow our crops with, but then you have to get rid of or dispose of that brine somehow, and the only way they can do it right now, at least, is to dump it back into the ocean, which raises the salinity of the ocean, albeit marginally, but just enough to disturb the ecological balance, which is very, very delicate. And it's something that we need to factor into our preparedness, is that there may come a point where we've fished the oceans dry, where, you know, we're not able to grow anything, and or at least not on the scale that we're growing it right now, because we've moved everything to where it's not naturally supposed to be, so much that those systems cannot naturally replenish themselves and create that equilibrium that's required for the constant replenishing. This is why we need to ship fertilizer from the far north, where we mine it up here in Saskatchewan, to China and the rest of the world that needs it, because they're sucking those nutrients out of the ground. They're not replacing that biomass. Anyways, go and watch our video that we released with Gardening in Canada today. Her name's Ashley. She has a YouTube channel, as you know, and probably the most stuff I've learned in 2 hours in a long time. And very, very good, very knowledgeable. Go check it out, guys. Stuff you need to know. Because look, when it comes down to it, the only way to endure this in a way, what's coming, and, you know, I just mean the collapse of civilization as we know it, the only way to endure it is going to become a macro prepper. And that's going to entail that you have the means to regenerate energy in the form of food, in the form of electricity and heat, and other methods of climate control. Okay, it's all energy, if you cannot regenerate energy, then your survival time is going to be limited. Yes, we can stockpile energy. That's what I call meso-preparedness. That's for the shelter-in-place, ride out a, up to a 3-month disaster type prepper. There's also micro-preparedness, which is getting a bug-out bag because you live in the inner city and you have no other choice and you don't have the ability or the means or the space to actually regenerate your own food. We all start somewhere in that space, but ultimately the end goal for any serious long-term prepper needs to be macro preparedness, homesteading, self-reliance. So if you're not there yet, don't worry. I'm not one of these people who says, yeah, you need to uproot your life, go move out to the country. It's easy because I did it type thing. It's not easy. I'm still looking for land, and I've, over the past 20 years, been able to accumulate enough resources to be able to get some land. But I understand why somebody who's living in the inner city, it's not achievable for everybody. And for that reason, you need to start where you're at. So the most important thing you can do is, if you don't have the means to go off-grid yet, is just focus on EDC, focus on your ability to escape a disaster zone. If you find yourself in a high-risk area or an urban environment that might be the target or succumb to some natural disaster, then you need to have a bug-out plan. So you're basically tailoring your preparedness plans around bugging out. And then eventually, once you do become more established, and usually later in life, of course, that's when you focus on meso-preparedness, stockpiling energy. Then ultimately, you go for the homestead, right? So just start where you're at. In terms of what's going on in the war, what can I say about the war? NATO is concerned, but and that's why Germany is trying to fast track weapon shipments to Ukraine. They're worried about Odessa, like we've been saying for a while now, that they're going to likely turn Ukraine into this rump state, which doesn't have access to the Black Sea. All the most important industrial sectors of the country are now under Russian control. The biggest nuclear power station in the country is under Russian control. And we've been saying this all along. Well, all I'm not gonna criticize anybody, but there's some people on YouTube who are just telling people what they want to hear and not what they need to hear. The threat is real, okay? There's even this agreement now between Russia and Nicaragua that Russians can now bring their troops, potentially have military bases in Nicaragua. Now, I can't remember how her name is pronounced, but she's one of the spokespeople for the Russian government, Zakharova. I can't remember what her name is, blonde lady. She's saying that this isn't a big deal. This is like a biannual exercise that we conduct. Don't worry about it. We're not going to be moving nuclear missiles into the country anytime soon. However, the state-run Russian media is jumping all over this, and they're saying that, hey, what do they say here? They say they always go to the most extreme, man. What are we waiting for? If American missile systems can reach Moscow from Ukrainian territory, it's time for Russia to put something powerful near an American city on a hill. That's a translation. I think they're talking about maybe Capitol Hill or something like that. But yeah, so the Nicaraguans are saying that this is for humanitarian aid, search and rescue operations, and emergency, natural disaster mitigation, that kind of thing. But it also allows them, to act as a staging ground for troops, ships, and aircraft of the armed forces of the Russian Federation. So that's another point of escalation. There is talks by Ukrainian officials that Belarus is looking to strengthen its military and double its military numbers. There was concerns that the Belarusians or Russia was using Belarus as a launching point for various missiles into Ukraine. And of course, we know recently Belarus had mined their border with landmines. And these are all points of escalation. There's the falling out of U.S.-Russian diplomatic relations that are at an all-time low and are at risk of just expelling ambassadors outright. I still think we're a ways away from that yet, but I think it's only a matter of time before, like I said, before another Franz Ferdinand moment happens. And the shit royally hits the fan. I think we're on the brink. You know, I go away for 48 hours and I think to myself, maybe I'll come back and I'll realize that it was all just a figment of my imagination. But no, the markets say otherwise. China tells the U.S. that it will fight at all costs for Taiwan. Of course, we all know what's coming there. Also, the Russians, it has been confirmed that the Russians are using their new stealth fifth-generation fighter, the Su-57, in Ukraine. Apparently, they're using 4. And this is concerning, I think, and it's concerning for NATO that the Russians are feeling comfortable enough now in Ukrainian airspace to use some of their more advanced equipment. I think there is probably reluctance for obvious reasons. You know, the Ukrainians' missile defense, air defense was formidable, I think, up until recently. Of course, now the Russians are steamrolling in the east, and this is not a matter of preference. Once again, this is just me telling you what you need to hear, because it's the truth. That's what's happening, and that's why they're sending $40 billion worth of weapons there, because the whole plan, I think, is falling apart. As we talked about last time, you know, the world is splitting into two, and the Russians are capitalizing on the high cost of oil, their economy. While there likely will be some sort of recessionary pressure at some point, for now is still benefiting from the high cost of oil. And we need to constantly keep in mind that there's 7 billion people, more than 7 billion people, who are outside of NATO, and they're all developing their economies, and they're going to need energy. Consider that one North American uses the same amount of energy. We're talking about oil, essentially. Right, uses the same amount of oil as one person in sub-Saharan Africa. So imagine when those countries start to develop, and I believe one North American consumes the same amount as about 130 people who live in India. So when these countries continue to industrialize, which they're going to, where do you not think that the need for energy is going to increase? So Russia doesn't really care if we don't buy their oil, I don't think. And I think the whole plan is going to kind of backfire on our government. And yeah, there's going to be real hard times ahead for many places around the world. But it just seems like there's so many fuses in this globalized machinery that are being blown out right now, and it's creating all of these second and third order effects, which are going to make our lives extremely complicated. All the more reason to get out there, get your hands dirty, quit being a little bitch, go out to the gun range, do what you got to do, put in the work every day. If you're watching these videos, fine, put them on in the background while you're doing the work. You can do that. Okay, let me know if you guys have any tips and tricks for gardening indoors, because that's what we're going to be focusing on next. Now, some of you know we talked about passive solar greenhouses in a previous video with Dean from Arcopia Family Freeze Dry, and we're going to be doing that, simulating that here in the studio, where our windows are facing in the right direction, but we also need more supplemental lighting. So let me know if you have any suggestions on lighting that we can use indoors. Of course, we're going to be tapping Gardening in Canada's YouTube brain, but it's always good to hear what you guys have to say, because growing food right now is going to be like growing gold. It's that the price of it is too damn high. It's too damn precious. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Take care, guys. Stay safe. Go out and enjoy the weather while it lasts. Just don't get a sunburn. Thanks for watching. Take care.